All right, so I'm Kathleen Walker with New England Endurance Events, and tonight's Tri Talk is with Dr. Ted Geddis, and it's life adjustments for the training athlete. Um, his subtitle, which is totally speaks to me, is how to get faster without blowing up your life. So I think this is something that we all need. So I appreciate you guys being here, and let me go ahead and do a oh. Let's see. We are recording, so I want you to know that. And we do have notes. So if anyone's like, "Oh, that AI companion, we have got notes. If you need those, let me know. I can always send them to you." Um, all right, so let's get started. We have Dr. Ted Geddis with us. He has many certifications, and he's going to kind of tell you all of the reasons why you want to listen to him today. But Andy and I know Ted best as the owner of Catalyst Endurance Coaching, and he is also the head coach for the Northeastern University Triathlon Team. So, Ted, do you want to take it from here?
Sure. Give me a moment here and I'll get my screen shared and we'll be good to go. There we go. Okay. So, first of all, I want to thank Andy and Kathleen and Beth Ann for having me come in and do this lecture this evening. I really hope everyone's kind of dug out from the last few weeks and kind of getting back to some normalcy, which is nice to see. So, as Kathleen said, our lecture tonight's about life adjustments for the training triathlete, how to get faster without blowing up our life. For anyone that's new to the sport, it can be really kind of overwhelming to get into the sport and try to figure out how do I integrate this whole thing into life in general. And that's kind of what I want to talk about tonight. And hopefully you'll garner some valuable tools and information to allow you to do that. I like to start all my lectures off with a quote. And so I think this is very apropos for the sport of triathlon in that success is the sum of small efforts repeated day in and day out. Success is not heroic efforts. It's not big, massive things going on at any point in time. It's more what do we do day to day that allows us to move forward and become successful, not only in triathlon, but life in general. So before we kind of get into meat and potatoes, I'll tell you a little bit about myself. I have an undergraduate degree in neuro and muscle physiology from University of Guelph. I'm originally Canadian, so it's a school up in Canada. From there, I attended Northwestern University of Health Sciences in Minnesota and got my chiropractic degree and practiced for 30 plus years as a chiropractor, specializing in sports medicine, biomechanics, and soft tissue. I ran the conservative side for a 30 doctor orthopedic group. So when they couldn't cut them, they kind of sent them to me. Oops, let me go back. Sorry. They sent them to me to figure out what was wrong and what I could do to help them out. Give me one moment and see if I can go back. Um, the problem was is I kind of got burnt out fighting with insurance companies and in all honesty, the apathy of the American public in their health. And I tried to find a new group of people, a new uh, area where I could go in and be able to help individuals. And that led me to triathlon. So I got my first certification over 15 years ago and progressed to get my level two certification in short course and long course, as well as youth and junior elite through at USAT. And I'm currently getting my level three, which is the penultimate or the highest level of certification within USAT. I'm also a USA Cycling Certified Coach, Ironman, USCA Certified Triathlon Coach, and have multiple certifications in training and racing with power, both on the bike and run, in nutrition and functional strength, et cetera, et cetera. I'm in constant search of more and more things that will help me be a better coach for all my athletes and allow them to achieve success in the sport, whatever their definition of success may be. Um, I'm also the owner and director of Catalyst Endurance Coaching. I primarily focus on triathlon from the beginner all the way to age group champion qualifiers, but also do work with cyclists and endurance runners from anywhere from 5K to ultra distance running. And as Kathleen said, I'm also the head coach for Northeastern University Triathlon Team. We're currently ranked number two in our conference and number 13th in the country. And we're looking forward to our next set of nationals, which will occur in about 3 weeks down in Mississippi, and we'll see how we go from there. So we all got into the sport of triathlon for different reasons. And that's all personal to you. Maybe it was to get faster, to challenge yourself, maybe for an identity, to be healthier, build confidence, be in control, or for life. You want to, a bigger life, more energy, stress relief, whatever it happens to be. But as we enter the sport, it becomes very apparent that it takes a lot of time to progress or improve in the sport of triathlon with all the other stressors we have going on in life. And so the goal is for me as a coach is to try to make sure that we integrate triathlon into life, not to have it just piled on top of everything, because that's where frustration and angst comes into play. And a lot of times we see athletes leaving the sport, and really that's the last thing that we want to do, because triathlon is such a powerful sport and can integrate to a lifestyle and have a very healthy lifestyle and make life very, very interesting and fulfilling. So the real problem isn't really a training problem, it's a bandwidth problem. So we have to integrate triathlon into life. We have careers, families, social events, all those type of things. And very rarely do we find triathletes lacking in motivation. It's more, how do they go about integrating this swim, bike, run, functional strength, recovery, nutrition, all those aspects into their life in general. And so what I'm going to try to go do through tonight is some basic steps that we can do that allow that to happen and really that are really relatively pain-free in the grand scheme of things. So when most of us come into the sport, all we've done is kind of pile training on top of everything else, our personal life, our work life. And then what we end up seeing happen is that we have illness, injury, poor sleep, and we're just not seeing the results that we want. And quite often I have athletes come to me trying to figure out they're doing all this work, but why aren't they getting better? They're getting up at 4 a.m. to cram in a workout, or they're working out at 9 o'clock at night, and then their sleep, quite frankly, sucks, and they're not feeling better in the morning. They're not fueling correctly because they don't really know how much food they should take in before, during, and after. They've got all these life stressors that pile up and are affecting their overall performance, and they don't really know the importance of recovery and prioritizing recovery in the grand scheme of things. So once we can start to learn how all these different aspects intertwine with one another, we can integrate training into the big picture and be much more successful. And a lot of times more is not better, better is better. And just kind of cutting back and making sure what we're doing is applicable to what our goals are, not just piling more and more on top, we end up seeing the results that we really want to see. The big thing that's hard for new athletes to understand, and even to a certain extent experienced athletes, is it's you can only train as much as your body can absorb. And that's where that more and more is doesn't really work. Stress on the body is the same, whether it's training stress, emotional stress, work stress, whatever it happens to be. And I'd like to break it down into training stress, mental stress, emotional stress. The body's response is exactly the same. It doesn't differentiate it. And so we have to be able to make sure that we take the big picture into consideration when we determine how much load we can handle at any point in time, and realize that at times it's perfectly okay to step back and chill out a little bit and cut back on the training that we're doing to allow us to adapt and to improve and go forward and not dig holes that we can't dig out of. We always want to kind of be a little bit overreaching. We call that functional overreaching, pushing ourselves to a certain extent, but we don't want to go to the point where we can't get back from where we are and we have to take prolonged periods of time away from the sport to be able to get better. The big thing that's really hard to understand at times that the magic really isn't in the workouts. It's how we integrate the workouts into the grand scheme of things. And I know I may be repeating myself, but we're doing this for over 15 years. And especially working with the kids up at Northeastern, it's really taught me is that they kind of want to just do everything. But the problem is we can't do everything. We have to kind of pick and choose and have give and take in our life to really be able to perform at our maximum ability. And that's you as an athlete has to set those goals and what do we want to achieve in those goals, and then set up a realistic plan to help you achieve those goals moving forward. So the big thing I really stress with my athletes is boulders before pebbles, making sure we get the big things right first. Lay that foundation for success, then worry about the little things that can occur or help us out as we move forward. The hard thing that we have is that we're inundated daily with things called marginal gains. The little things that may help us get a little bit better, but if you haven't laid the foundation, actually may be deleterious or negatively impact your improvement. We're inundated with Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, bro science, all these different things that come at us all the time about how we can get better or quick fixes to make us the athlete we want to be. But in actuality, it's consistency day after day, week after week, month after month that leads us to where we want to be, and ultimately success in the sport, success in life, and the longevity in the sport that we're really seeking in the grand scheme of things. So while marginal gains help us out once we've laid the foundation, it's by no means something we should focus on or pay attention to as we enter the sport or are gradually building into the sport. So, what are the basics? What are the things I really emphasize or stress to my athletes on a regular basis that they really need to focus on in the big picture? So, those basics are organization, proper sleep, adequate fueling and hydration relative to your training demands, making sure easy is easy and hard is hard, functional strength, recovery, protecting your emotional bandwidth, and community. And you'll hear me have this common thing as I go forward is that the key is consistency. Heroic efforts are great. And the kids at Northeastern really taught me every year there's a group of them that want to bike from Boston to P-Town, and then they take ferry back home. That's all fine and good, but when do you do that? And how does that affect your training afterwards? And if it does it negatively impact what your ultimate goal is? And so those are the things that we have to keep into consideration. I'm not saying it's you should not go out and do big heroic efforts once in a while. It looks good on Strava and you can kind of pound your chest and say, look what I was able to achieve. But it does definitely impacts the overall progression as you move through the sport. So we want to do those judiciously and sprinkle them in within the grand scheme of things within your plan. So what we're going to do is break down each one of these things and look at them in a little bit more in depth. So organization, it's kind of the keystone. If we're not organized and we're helter-skelter, there's constant monkey chatter, angst, stress with everything that we do. So I really stress for my athletes that they have what I call the Sunday sit down. On Sunday evening, they take 10 to 15 minutes to review the week ahead. What are the key sessions that either you as a self-coached athlete or a program that you've purchased have or your coach has put in? What do you have going on in life? Does your son or daughter have a big soccer match, a basketball game, a dance recital? Do you have a major presentation or travel for work? How do all those things work? But also, as we've learned over these last few weeks, what does Mother Nature have in store for us? And where do those friction points happen with the grand scheme of things of those? Once we understand that or know that, then we can start to lay out our week based on what those friction points are. Adjust the week so when we wake up in the morning, we know exactly what we're going to do. Our clothes are laid out for the day, be it your bib and cycling jersey are ready, your shoes and running shorts are set, your swim bag is packed, that it happens automatically. There's no, I don't know what I'm going to do today. Or all of a sudden, oh, I forgot I got this big meeting. I can't do a 3 hour run or a 3 hour bike. So that organizational standpoint really sets the tone for how the week will play out and what you're able to do moving forward with absolutely no stress or increased load or cognitive load in the grand scheme of things. Next is sleep. And I can't tell you the number of athletes that come to me that sacrifice sleep just for the sake of getting an extra hour on the bike or run. And you don't realize that sleep is active recovery. Recovery is when our body gets better. It's not necessarily the stress of the exercise itself, it's how to recover from that exercise. So, proper sleep allows active recovery and is a performance insurance for the sessions that we want to do. Poor sleep is equivalent to an inability to handle load. So, from a practical standpoint, if we can get 6 to 7 hours of sleep, we're doing pretty good. And everybody's different. Some people can get by really well in 6 hours. Some people require 10 hours. But once we see our sleep drop below 6 hours or it's very broken or not a lot of deep sleep, we have to make modifications to our plan. Typically, it's reducing intensity. We can still keep duration, in other words, the length of session, but we want to cut it back a little bit because not only do we not hit the numbers that we may want to hit, which kind of leads to a little bit of monkey chatter and wondering if things are really working. But it also deleteriously affects the efforts down moving forward. And we always have to keep into consideration not only what's happening today, but what's down the week as we move forward working on a program. When we have big sessions coming up, maybe it's a really intense session on the bike or a really long bike and run off bike on the weekend, we really want to try to guard our sleep that the night before that session. We want to make sure that we really get adequate sleep so we can go out, nail that session, ensure that we're having the true physiological response that the session is intended to have for us, and make the gains that we hope occur as a result of that not being impaired by poor sleep. Fueling and hydration relative to load. Now, there's two different ways to look at this. One is what we call the macro cycle or the year in general, and the second is more the microcycle or the session itself, which is either the session or the week. So first we'll talk about the macro cycle. Just like a season is periodized, in other words, for me, I have three different blocks of training. I have a general block, which is kind of laying the foundation, the specific block, which gets the athlete ready for the race they chose, and then the competitive block that fine tunes or sharpens the knife for that race itself. And in each one of those blocks, our nutritional needs or our goals change, just like the focus of the block itself. So if an athlete comes to me and wants to do more of a body composition, kind of weight loss, or they want to become more metabolically efficient, then we want to try to make sure that that's done during the general phase. That's not something that we want to do during the intense sessions. Once we get into the sessions themselves, we have to fuel the machine. We have to make sure that the body's getting what it needs to fuel properly and be able to move forward. Quick question, Kathleen. Can you see the imaging or just my screen?
I can still see your share.
Okay, good.
Okay.
Sorry. So I just want to make sure. So we periodize or change the nutrition and hydration standpoint based on what an athlete's goals are during each block of training. When we move into the individual sessions itself, we have to determine what fueling and hydration we need for those sessions themselves. So for hard sessions, we want to make sure we've got some fueling on board and fuel a little bit during. So if we're going out and doing a sweet spot bike ride, we want to have calories on. If we're doing an endurance ride and we're looking at trying to become more metabolically efficient and be better at burning fat as a fuel, we don't want fat fuel on board beforehand because we want the body to be forced into using fat. As our intensity increases, we want to increase our carbohydrate load because intensity, the only source we really use is carbohydrates. So we don't want to bonk or have an issue in the grand scheme of things. So we want that carb to come on, those carbs to be ingested during the session itself. For me, one of the biggest things is post-workout fueling, and this is ignored by a lot of athletes. I'm a huge advocate that you have to take in particularly protein, but some carbs within 20 minutes of workout, of finishing your workout. Because what that does is it flips the switch and turns the body into recovery mode. It blunts what's called the cortisol response. Cortisol is necessary to see improvement overall, but it's what we call a catabolic hormone. It's a breakdown hormone. And if it's left unchecked, we continue the breakdown process even after the workout is done. So I want to get some type of protein and carbs within 20 to 30 minutes after the activity. Then within the next 2 to 3 hour window, that's when I worry about restoring glycogen stores, restoring caloric deficit from the workout itself. So we have a pretty big window to restore over the big picture, but we want to get the body into recovery very, very quickly. It's really hard for a lot of athletes sometimes to realize how many calories they burn in a workout. And underfueling really limits gains in the grand scheme of things. And I really learned this from Northeastern. The kids would go out and do a 3 to 4 hour bike ride and take nothing in. They're burning like 2,000 calories. And they may have a basal metabolic rate, and that means how many calories you burn if you just laid on the sofa all day and didn't move, of 1,800. So they're already negative 4,000 calories. And so that's a lot of food to try to take in a day. And then realize that that doesn't just affect today, the workout you did, it affects the next few days down the road because you're in a negative caloric intake. And so we want to make sure that we're fueling adequately. And the nice thing is Training Peaks, if you use that as a source, tells you exactly how many calories you burned in a workout. So you know how many calories you need to take in. But realize when you're in a workout, you're never going to be one to one. You're never going to match calories burned to calories intake. We're just trying to reduce that deficit as much as possible so that it's easier to meet the overall demands come the end of the day. And lastly is daily and in-session hydration. So the easy way to look at daily hydration is your body weight divided by two. That's the number of ounces a day you should be taking in. That's water. That's not tea, coffee, soda, fruit juice. That's water. If you want to throw a slice of lemon and a pinch of salt in, that's fine. The pushback I get from athletes a lot is that if I try to drink that much water, I'm peeing all the time. Well, that tells me you're already functionally dehydrated before you even start. Once your body gets to equilibrium or homeostasis, that doesn't happen anymore. And so once you get used to drinking that much water, you're not in the bathroom on a regular basis. So if somebody's saying, I can't do that because I pee all the time, they're functionally dehydrated because their body can't absorb the amount of water it needs because it's already below where it wants to be. In session hydration is essential. I don't care how short a session it is. Shorter sessions can be pure water. Once we move forward into either harder sessions or longer sessions, um, I make sure my athletes take in both a little bit of sugar and primarily sodium or some form of electrolyte. And the reason being is there's things called sodium glucose like receptors in your gut. And you have to have water, sugar, and salt for everything to be transported from the gut into the bloodstream. And so, yeah, you could take electrolytes in, but if there's no sugar to facilitate that transport, it's not being brought into the system itself. So we need all this little bit of stuff in a session that's either extremely long or extremely intense. The research is not questionable, but not really there with regard to what exactly caused cramping, and are electrolytes essentially necessary for the grand scheme of thing, but they are essential for proper body function. So I'd like to have some type of electrolyte in most of the drink mixes that my athletes use. I also defer away from sodium chloride or table salt as that electrolyte because it's hard on the gut and it's not absorbed well. So we like to look for some other type of source of sodium, and that could be pink Himalayan salt. It could be Celtic sea salt, something sodium malate, something along those lines that's better absorbed through the gut that facilitates that absorption into the gut in the grand scheme of things. That's right. You've got to move things here a little bit. There we go. The easy, easy, the hard, hard. This is probably one of the hardest things for especially new athletes to understand or grasp. The American mindset is no pain, no gain. In reality, nothing can be farther from the truth. That a lot of times we spend in that gray zone, that hardish type of thing, because if we're not pushing ourselves, we're not getting better. But in actuality, from a physiological standpoint, there's very little to be gained in that gray zone. We don't see the physiological benefits from either the easy stuff or the hard stuff. So the easy days, they almost have to be kind of like, I call them stupid easy. It's almost like, why am I doing this? It doesn't really seem that I'm working. But that really easy work facilitates or encourages the body to produce more mitochondria, which are the engines that drive our muscles, increase blood plasma to be able to carry oxygen, more capillaries to the muscles to deliver more oxygen. And then the hard stuff has to be hard, like uncomfortably, really uncomfortably hard, because that facilitates all that stuff working even better. Now, with that said, we all can't train with multiple hours where we can have just 80-20 or the Norwegian method or the totally polarized, where we expend prolonged periods of time in each. So there is some time we spend in that gray zone, that hardish, particularly for our short course athletes, sprint and Olympic, and to a certain extent 70.3, because that's where we race. And so we have to get used to how that feels, how we perform in those levels, but realize that a lot of our training shouldn't be in that area. So, as an example, for me as a coach with my athletes, Once we've done our big block of FTP development or power development on the bike, we transition to race specific, where really there's only three workouts. One workout is an endurance ride, typically zone two, and that could range anywhere from an hour and a half to 6 hours, 7 hours, depending on the distance of the race. The second workout is subthreshold or sweet spot. So we're not producing a lot of lactate that requires a lot of recovery time, but we're maintaining our power output and maybe gaining a little bit. Then the last workout is strength and endurance or low cadence work, where we're literally trying to facilitate or get our body to be able to recruit more muscles for power production. And I just use variations of those three workouts once we get into the specific and particularly the competitive phase to make sure that we're not spending too much time in the gray zone, but we're really hitting on all the markers that we need to have the most gains with the easiest amount of recovery and optimized performance come race day. Next is functional strength. This is really non-negotiable that you need functional strength in a program, particularly with our master athletes. There's something called senile sarcopenia. What that simply means, as we get older, we lose muscle mass. We can't stop that from happening, but we can slow that process down. And strength training is essential for that to occur. Simply riding your bike, going to the pool, and running is not enough. And so, by a simple strength training program, doesn't have to be complicated, doesn't have to be pushing major weights, doesn't have to be long, but an easy program that you can do 2 to 3 times a week has major gains on overall performance, but also improves joint stability, how strong your knees, ankles, hips are, postural control, both on the bike and in the run, to a certain extent in the pool. Fatigue resistance, which is huge, particularly when we look at long course racing. Force transfer, how can we transfer the power we're able to produce into the bike or onto the run? And what we call that is run economy. How efficient are we in translating the power, the motions that we're doing into speed going forward as opposed to up and down? And probably most importantly, injury prevention, making sure that we are able to toe the line come race day for all the work and efforts that we put into getting us ready to go there. Recovery. This is essential. And sometimes, again, for a new athlete, it's really hard to understand why do I have to take slow weeks or lesser load weeks or days off? But that's really where improvement occurs. Improvement doesn't necessarily occur from the load itself. It's allowing the body's the ability to recover from that load and get better. So when we focus too much on stress and avoid rest, we ultimately ends up in poor performance. We may not see it when we first start training, but as the season goes on and on and on, we're going to see our performance levels drop and drop and drop. And we get more and more frustrated because we're, again, putting in the work, but not seeing the results or the fruits of our labor of that work that we're doing. So we really need to stress those recovery weeks are extremely important and not overdo it on the recovery weeks, which is sometimes really hard to do because all of a sudden you look down, the coach says I'm supposed to be in zone one, zone two on a run, and all of a sudden you're in zone three, zone four because it seems too easy. But that's almost how it's supposed to be. So the major reasons we want adequate recovery is to maximize training adaptation. That's where stuff really occurs, where we get better. It's that what we call super compensation to occur. Retain health and wellness. When we're always overstressed, eventually we're going to see multiple illnesses occur, multiple niggles or injuries occur, and we can't figure out necessarily why, but it's our body's inability to heal and recover from the load that we're asking it to be able to withstand. Obviously, injury avoidance is key with the recovery. I think one of the big ones that's kind of ignored is sustainability. If we don't allow recovery to occur, we get burnt out. When we get burnt out, we get frustrated with sport and we walk away. And that's the last thing we really want to happen. And lastly is our ability to thrive in all aspects of life, not just sport itself, but life in general, family, work, social. When we're able to recover, we're not cranky, we're not tired, we're not frustrated. We're able to really enjoy life in general. And a quote from a couple of my favorite authors, Brad Stulberg and Steve Magnus, is stress plus rest equals growth. You have to have both components to grow. And again, this is not just in sport, but life in general. Emotional bandwidth. And what we're looking at here is the stress of life in general. We all have a finite emotional bandwidth. And it's really easy to get outside of that bandwidth of all that's going on in life, particularly right now with everything that's going on between a major snowstorm, the political environment, what's going on in the world. We can get really stressed out, but it's also work pressures, family illnesses, travel, all those things come into play. Realize the body reacts to stress exactly the same, regardless of where that stress comes from. And fatigue is accumulative, again, regardless of where that stress comes from. So we have to protect that emotional bandwidth. If we're finding that we're getting outside of that bandwidth or stress is really spiking in our life, we've got to pull back. We've got to decrease the load. And so that may be turning a VO2 max session into an endurance session on the bike or on the run, or decreasing the duration that we're out there on a bike, run, or even a swim to make sure that we're able to handle it. As we noted earlier, our body is able to absorb and adapt from that load and allows us to move forward. Now, this kind of should be the exception, not the rule. So, with my athletes, if I see them keep cutting back on the sessions that I'm giving them, I have to have a frank discussion. Why is this occurring? Is the load too much? Am I, as a coach, giving you too much to do? Or is life just not allowing you to incorporate all of it? Then we make adjustments based on how the season flows forward. And that's where that honest discussion, both internally within yourself or externally with your coach, allows you to make those changes to optimize your overall performance and success ultimately in the sport itself. Long term consistency. What I mean by this is looking at the big picture. So I have my athletes look at where do they want to be 5 years from now, 3 years from now, 2 years from now, and this year. What is their path to where they want to be and what do they want to achieve within the sport itself? The nice thing with New England endurance events is that you can race from June into September and beyond. And the races are really well laid out and gapped that you're not going to overload at any point in time. But the thing is first look at that big picture, that 10,000 foot view, and then slowly hone in from that big, what we call macro cycle to a mesocycle or your blocks of training, and then to the micro cycle, the sessions itself. And as long as we're able to repeat and continually load the system on a consistent basis, we're going to be able to achieve the goals that we wanted to achieve, be able to stay in the sport longer and maintain our health throughout the sport itself. Quite often, we see that athletes, both coached and uncoached athletes, all of a sudden say, "Oh, the race is like really coming up quick." 20 weeks seems like a really long time, but once we really get into the meat and potatoes of it, it comes very rapidly. And so having this groundwork laid out really helps you establish what you need to do, when you need to do it, and how you progress through the sport for that sustainability, that healthy, and not having those heroic weeks trying to play catch up to get ready for the race itself. Our goal is to get you to line fit and fresh, not fit and fatigued. And that's really what you want to do come race day. And lastly is community. Anybody that's been in a sport for a while knows that triathlon is a very lonely sport. It's a lot of time in the pool, on your bike, running by yourself. It's really hard to find fellow athletes that can match your power, your speed, whatever it happens to be. So anytime you can join a group, be it Cape Cod Triathlon Club, Falmouth Running Club, Boston Triathlon Club, whatever it happens to be, and get out with a group of like-minded individuals, it is very stimulatory, very motivating in the grand scheme of things. They help keep you accountable. They motivate you. After your session, you go out and have shared experiences, which really makes the situation much more fun in the grand scheme of things and the big picture. That being said, for my athletes, usually about 6, maybe 8 weeks out is where I want them to pull away from that community type of efforts and really focus on the specific sessions that I'm giving them to ensure success with what goals they've established in the racing that they've picked to be able to do. And so it's not that I don't want them to do it, but again, it's really hard to match stuff. And either they may be going too hard or too easy in those group sessions, which is not going to impact their overall improvement the way we want to see come race day. But again, we really want to stress that community aspect of things as much as we can. So, in the big picture, triathlon should expand your life. If triathlon is draining the joy out of life, you really have to take a step back and adjust your approach. What am I doing wrong that's not allowing me to enjoy something that I've probably enjoyed for a prolonged period of time? So that's when you have to kind of step back and ask yourself some questions. Are you showing up better at work? Are you more present at home? Are you thriving or are you just surviving? If you have negative answers to these, you have to take that step back. Is it triathlon that exhausting you? Are you resentful or dreading going out for a session? Do you always feel drained? That's when you have to adjust what you're doing and figure out why. A self pat on the back, that's where a coach really kind of comes in handy because you kind of look, he can sit there, he or she can step back and look at the big picture and figure out what needs to be changed to allow you to continue to succeed and thrive in the sport, not just survive. If you're continuing to grow, you have confidence, resiliency, connections, you're on the right track. Keep doing what you're doing. You're succeeding in the sport, and that's all we can ask. Triathlon is a great sport. It's really of I've done runs, competitive running, competitive cycling, and triathlon. Triathlon is the most, for lack of a better description, the most kind of family orientated activity that I've seen out there. The only thing I've seen even close is cyclocross, where everybody's there to help each other. Yes, we want to succeed and do well come race day, but we have no problem helping our fellow athletes be able to succeed as we move forward. So the big thing is we've got to build your recipe for success. Hopefully you've sat down, kind of established some goals. What do I want to achieve for the season? And what do I need to achieve those goals? And what are the ingredients that I need to use to get there? Strength training, part of sleep, making sure focus on daily nutrition, but also in-session nutrition, establishing the big picture, then focusing down on the small picture, making sure that it's okay to be uncomfortable. That's part of the sport. Embrace low intensity. Realize that really big gains can be made at doing a lot of low intensity work. Ensure that we're fueling adequately post training to make sure that we're turning that switch into recovery mode and restoring everything we need to make for success for sessions following up. Nailing our daily hydration on a regular basis, and having connection and community within the sport to allow us to share our experience overall. By combining all of these, you can make a very good meal, so to speak, and have really good, long-lasting success in a sport that most of us probably on this call really love and want to do for a prolonged period of time. At that point, I thank you for attending tonight. I'm more than happy to sit and answer questions and discussion. My contact information is included. I'm more than happy to just have a chat with anybody that wants to have a chat. I love talking about the sport and what minor changes sometimes we can add to really facilitate overall improvement and enjoyment in the sport itself. At that point, I'm going to hand it over to Kathleen, and we can go from there.
Thank you so much, Ted. That was really, really great. So much great information. And I failed to say to everybody else before Ted got started that if you put your questions in chat, we'll read them so that way Dr. Geddis can answer them. But so while you guys are thinking about that, I've got some of my own questions. Um, actually, before I ask questions, Ted had given a nice plug for New England endurance events. Thank you very much. And the Cape Cod Tri Club. I know not everyone on this call is here on the Cape. I am. We do have lots of triathlon clubs that we work with that come to our races. So if you do not have a club and you would like to, if you would send a note to Beth Ann, who's on this call, Beth Ann, if you can put your email in chat, she and just tell her what area that you live in, and we can probably find a club that is close to you. So we're happy to do that. We have so many great triathlon clubs, that come to our races, that it's kind of nice to be able to match people up. All right, so here's a question for you, Ted. So towards the end of your presentation, you were talking about community and how the idea is like lifelong sport, rather than, oh, I'm going to do this one race. We have so many people that we know that have done like an Ironman, and they're like, okay, did that, done, next thing, because for all the reasons that you were talking about, right? They went in and they didn't work on it, work on their triathlon kind of life and a consistency. So I found that triathlon has changed my life. And I'm wondering if you have anything that you could tell us about some experiences, maybe you um, or some of your people have experienced that falls into that triathlon has really changed their life.
Probably the couple of biggest things for me. One is my oldest daughter attended Bentley University, was part of the triathlon team, and still her best friends 10 years now from graduation were part of that triathlon team. And then again, I use the kids a lot because I call them kids because my youngest is older than most of the kids that I coach. But they last season they went to a wedding, and the last seven captains from the triathlon team were at the wedding of two members of the Northeastern Triathlon Team were getting married. And we see that kind of progress moving forward, that they find their community, they're like-minded individuals, they love the healthy lifestyle and integrating it into life in general. I've got a lady that I'm coaching right now that's her goal is to qualify for Kona, but has I'm working very closely with her cardiologist and vascular surgeon that has an aortic aneurysm. And the sport has totally changed her life, that she realizes she can still do stuff and compete at a high level as long as we keep stuff reined in and not have that being, for lack of a better description, a disability or impairment to her ability to enjoy life. And so it's seeing that expansion of life in general, that we have things that we think are limiters, but if we do things correctly aren't really limiters. They just have to take them in consideration, but also realize that we develop lifelong friends from the sport itself.
I love that. And I would agree. Same,
Mhm.
that's my life. So we have Mish had a question for you. Any tips for nutrition? She finds that she tends to lean on eating high calorie but low nutrition foods like fast foods, especially since she doesn't enjoy cooking. It gets her through, but it doesn't seem to be really working towards that spirit of living a healthier lifestyle with triathlon.
I think so we're talking daily nutrition, I'm assuming at this point. So from a daily nutrition standpoint, it's really keeping it simple. And yes, it may be boring, but it's kind of doing some food prep and having your basic 3 to 4 meals that are very simple to make and having those ready and on hand right off the bat. Um, so it could be chicken, broccoli, and rice, or steak tips and quinoa and asparagus, whatever it happens to be, that doesn't have to have a lot of elaborate cooking, but it's really easy to have those established. Um, I found so my wife usually is away for a lot of the summer, so I'm by myself because the kids are off doing their thing. I found a food service that would just deliver food. So I had my main meal, typically supper, delivered to the house every night so that I didn't have to worry about cooking because when I'm by myself, I kind of fall in the same thing. It's really easy to throw a frozen pizza into the oven because that's really convenient, and easy. But there's a lot of food services out there that are really highly nutritious and do a really good job. And in the grand scheme of things, work out to be almost the exact same price as going to the store and buying everything, particularly with food waste. I found it was cheaper for me to do that than go to Whole Foods and buy lunch when I'm at the shop working in the summertime. When it comes to nutrition with regard to training, that can also become quite expensive. So I've got athletes, we developed our own program of developing their nutrition for typically on the bike that they make at home from stuff they could buy from Amazon that works out to be about 25 cents a serving versus, up to what, $5 for a Martin gel. But also there's a really good book called Portables by Alan Lim. Alan Lim was a nutritionist. He's the developer, the inventor of Scratch Nutrition, but he was also the lead nutritionist in exercise physiology for Lance Armstrong's team throughout the Tour de France. And the portables is all about making very simple, highly nutritious bites. So it could be rice cakes, whatever it happens to be, but it's also sweet and savory. So it's really easy to make them, wrap in foil, stick them in the fridge, and then take them out when you're going riding so we don't go broke trying to pay for all the stuff we have to do, particularly in long course racing. A weekend when you go out for a 5 hour ride and you're taking in anywhere from 60 to 120 grams per hour, you're looking at $30 to $40. Like that's pretty expensive. So limb, Lim. And
Thank you.
so yeah. So and it's Alan, sorry, Alan. If you ever get a chance to hear him speak, he's phenomenal. He's absolutely he's a first generation American. His family's Chinese. Um, Realize that there's a lot of f bombs when he speaks, but he is such a genius, and I've had the opportunity to actually meet him and sit down and talk to him for about a half hour. But really cool guy. So there's different ways to get around, but I think keeping it simple is the best way to do it. Don't overcomplicate daily nutrition. Um, the one thing I really stress with all my athletes, by and large, none of them are taking enough protein. That's pretty much across the board. And so when one of my athletes asks, I'm really tired, I'm fatigued, the first thing I say is, okay, increase your protein for the next week. If you're still fatigued, then we'll cut you back. Um, and so making sure you're bringing in some really good high quality protein, chicken breast, eggs. Realize there's a big study that just came out that the whole concept of eggs has been blown out of the water, has no effect on cholesterol, that type of thing. So eggs are a super valuable way to get protein and fats into the diet, along with choline and other things that are really healthy for the brain. So that's another really good alternative. So hopefully that answered your question, Mish.
Thank you for answering that. All right, so we have another question. What do I do if I'm sick for a few days and miss workouts? Should I try to make up for that? Like, how do you deal with that?
So you never play catch up. Realize that a season is not made by a single workout. It's that consistency of workouts stacked on one another. So the rule of thumb I use with my athletes, if whatever you have is below the neck, i.e. chest congestion, that type of thing, you're not working out at all. There's nothing that occur. All you're going to do is dig yourself deeper into a hole. If it's above the neck, i.e. a head cold, typically zone one, zone two, bike or run are fine. You don't want to try to go to swim with a head cold. And so you go really nice and easy. And that really facilitates, I call it moving blood, for lack of a better description. You're still working out, you're not losing fitness, but you're not pushing the body, which actually facilitates healing. The misconception is that you lose fitness quickly. It takes about 4 weeks of inactivity to really lose fitness. You lose speed quickly. You can lose high end stuff within seven to 10 days of not doing anything. You lose that very quickly. But it takes about 4 weeks. And the first few sessions may be a little challenging, but then all of a sudden everything clicks back in and you're able to get right back at it and be good to go. So it's below the chest, time off until it's not in the chest anymore. Above the chest, it's nice, easy zone two. Um, for a frank injury, i.e., an ankle sprain, something along those lines, um, it's the ability to perform an activity that used to cause pain 10 times that doesn't cause pain, i.e., let's say it hurts to do a single foot hop because you got a sprained ankle. As soon as you can hop on that foot 10 times, we can start to reintroduce running back into the big picture. And that's kind of, I don't want to oversimplify it or kind of make it that easy, but that's kind of the rule of thumb I use in general. I've got a kid coming off of a bit of a stress reaction. He overdid it. And that's our rule of thumb. 5 days in a row, he's able to single leg hop. Okay, now we can start put easy running back into the picture. You're not doing intensity, you're not doing hills, just nice, easy running until you're totally pain free and nothing hurts at all.
Great. That's super helpful. Thank you. All right, we have another question. I have my personal calendar is pretty full this year. What's the minimum hours I could train each week and still be okay for a sprint triathlon?
I would say 4 to 6. If you can get 2 bikes, 2 runs, 2 swims, and a little bit of functional strength training, you're good to go. Um, Obviously that has to be really kind of focused work. And for the bike and the run, you're looking at one intensity session because sprint triathlon is an intensity sport. You're at that point of I tell my wife when I used to race a lot that in a sprint triathlon, if I wasn't on the verge of puking, I wasn't racing. So it's pretty high intensity. So one's going to be an intensity session on the bike, one's going to be an intensity session on the run, the other is going to be endurance. Um, and then the swim is basically just to survive, for lack of a better description. If you can get through the swim, the other stuff is easy. So you don't want to just spend enough time in the pool, 1,000 yards, 1,200 yards, maybe A mile, if you can get that time in, just to have your confidence that, yeah, I can get through a 600, 750-yard swim and be able to get out of that feeling good and spry and ready to go for the run. So typically 4 to 6 hours works out for most athletes.
Great. Thank you. All right. We've got another question for you. Um, wait, sorry, let me get to it. All right. So the question is, um, oh, I lost it there. This is actually two-part. Does it matter if I train in the morning or after work? And um, can I switch my workouts around if like today I just can't bike and I want to run instead? Does that make any difference?
Yes and no. I know it's kind of a benign answer. So the easy thing to say is it's okay to move workouts around. Realize that running is by far the most demanding on the body. So if you have a really intense running session, it's really hard to have an intense bike session the next day because the body just doesn't recover as well. Um, that being said, can it still be done? Sure. Um, but I usually like, if that's the case, I'll throw a swim in between. So they'll do a bike, intense bike. Let's go do a swim for recovery because I consider swimming active recovery. Yes, it's demanding, but it's upper body, very little lower body. So we're using muscles we don't use on bike and run. Um, and then have the second, that intense bike going forward. Workouts don't really matter that much as far as timing goes, as far as the time of day. The one thing you have to take in consideration is, particularly an intense training session at night is going to affect your sleep. You're not going to have as good sleep coming out of that session. You're going to find it hard to fall asleep, and you're not going to have as much REM sleep and deep sleep after a hard session. The other thing to keep in mind is, one, swim should almost always come before everything else. So if you have 2 sessions in a day, your swim should be your first session, and bike or run or strength should be your second. Also, intensity is first, endurance is second. So if you have a double set for a day, that first session should always be intensity, and then the second session is your endurance type of work. And I mentioned that the reason for that is, one, the load, but also the intense session stimulates the mitochondria to work better. Those are the energy packets in your muscles that produce all the energy you need. Then the endurance session just causes more to be produced. And so when we do it the other way, we go into that intensity session fatigue and we don't get the bang for the buck. Our heart rate may be up in the zone we're shooting for, but we may not be producing the power or the pace because we go into it somewhat fatigued. So hopefully that answers the question.
Yes, thank you very much.
Mhm.
The another question for you. So David said he's a runner and a lifter, and just getting into triathlon. He swims and bikes casually, but not long-term training. Signed up for Falmouth. Thank you, David. And do you have any recommendations for a first timer?
Embrace the journey. Don't focus on a single session. Look at the big picture. The biggest thing is gradually build. So, you're coming from a weightlifting background. You already know that you can, quote unquote, gain strength relatively quickly. It's like all of a sudden I can move. When I first started, I could only do 20-pound dumbbells. Well, within 2 weeks, I can do 35 pounds. You're not any stronger. You're just more neuromuscular connected. You have better connection between the brain and the muscle. Realize that the skeletal system has about a 30-day delay. So your cardiovascular system is going to improve quickly, i.e., you can run farther, you can run faster, but there's a delay in how your skeletal system, the ligaments, tendons respond to that. And so the mistake they commonly make is that, oh, I can now, instead of a 12-minute mile, I can run 10-minute miles and feel okay doing it. Well, you're setting yourself up for injury because there just isn't the resiliency in the skeletal structure to withstand that. So you have to have that gradual build over a period of time. And you have to embrace that and understand that. Also, lost my train of thought for a second. It'll come back to me. So a slow, steady build is by far the most important, to make sure there's ultimate success in it. Um, the good thing at Falmouth, it's a flat course. It's hot, but it's flat, so you don't have to do a lot of hill work, that kind of stuff. Yes, it's very valuable, but focus on the basics. Keep it simple. Don't overcomplicate it. But again, avoid that middle ground where you're pushing yourself, but it's not that hard. When go easy on easy, and then have that one hard session a week on the bike and on the run, and you're going to end up having success overall. And I can't remember what I was going to say, but it'll pop back in at my point, and I'll try to return to it.
Okay. Can I add a second part to that or
Sure.
a more for you? David said that he swims casually and you've talked about bike and run, but what we found at Falmouth is there's a lot of people that are like, "Oh, that's fine. I can float the swim." And then they realize it's a third of a mile, which looks more like a mile when you're starting. So what should he do to help prepare for, for that third mile swim?
So one is it's amazing how many athletes come to me that they say, I know how to swim. You kind of know how to play, you don't know how to swim. So it's really putting the time in and in the pool and learning to be relaxed in the water. You can't swim tight. You can't swim frustrated or angry. And it takes, of all the three sports, swimming is by far the most technical. And it takes the longest time to develop. So you just have to, whatever your pace is, that's your pace. Don't force it. Don't try to go faster because you just tighten up and you windmill and you don't get anywhere. Your heart rate spikes and you get in trouble. Next is break that swim into little individual pieces. There's buoys out there along the marker. So don't look at the end buoy, just look at, okay, if I get to the next buoy, I'm okay. Then if I get to the next buoy, I'm okay. Realize that you can stop in the swim and hold on to a kayak or hold on to a paddleboard as long as you don't make forward progress. And so you can sit and recover, you can float on your back. Yes, you have to get point A to point B, but you have that ability to kind of take a step back, relax everything down, get your breathing back under control, and be good. Next, I would say is let the fanatics go, let the crazy guys go that just dive in the water and go crazy in the beginning, and just stick with your routine, nice and slow and smooth. Let them go out 9 times out of 10, they go hypoxic within the first 100 yards, unless they're an experienced triathlete. Then they go into full panic mode. If you go nice, slow, and steady, you're going to end up passing them in the swim and the grand scheme of things. So it's that. And lastly, is you've got to get in open water. You've got to get in the water and see what it feels like to swim in waves and current and sun and all those type of things because and without the black line it's really kind of can be really easy swimming in the pool because you've got a line guiding you, and so you've got to get in open water and learn how to sight and pick up on markers and all those type of things, which a lot of people don't really think about. And all of a sudden get in open water, and instead of a third of a mile, they've gone a half a mile because they've zigzagged all over the place. So spending time in open water, and there's multiple groups that have open water swimming on a regular basis. I know I live in Falmouth. There's a group that goes out every Sunday off of Chappie Beach, and they're more than happy to help newbies out and try to get them used to swimming in open water. Believe it or not, last week, right after the storm, I was walking my dog, and there's four of them out swimming, floating on the quote unquote icebergs that were out in the water, swimming in the wicked cold. But spend time in open water in the grand scheme of things. But probably biggest is allow the swim to develop organically. The harder you try to push it to make it, the worse you're going to do. And we see that all the time.
Oh, great. That's Ted, you've given such great advice today in your presentation and also in answering questions. Thank you so much. We are out of time. So I want to thank you all for being here. I want to thank Ted for taking
Thank
time
you.
to um, to talk with us. Thanks so much. And for anyone who either wants to go back and say Ted said something and what was that, or you want to tell your friends, this will be on YouTube on our New England Endurance Events YouTube channel. So that should be up by tomorrow afternoon. So thank you all for being on. We hope to see you during the season at our races, and have a good night.
Thank you.